Welcome, everyone. My name is Ileana Soto-Welty with MindOC. Thank you for being here for our Equity and Healing webinar today, which is brought to you by Be Well's ACEs Aware Trauma-Informed Network of Care. Please let us know your name and organization in the chat and what brings you here today. This event is being recorded. Questions and comments can be put in the chat as this will be an interactive session. We are excited to have Anusha Wijeyakumar with us to share her thoughts and insights on collective well-being and healing. Anusha is the daughter of Sri Lankan Tamil immigrant parents. Collective care is at the forefront of her work. Her passion is decolonizing yoga and wellness to ensure that these practices are equitable, inclusive, and accessible to all. Anusha is the wellness consultant for Hoag Hospital, one of the top-rated hospitals in the United States, where she works on integrative medicine by implementing mindfulness and meditation practices for maternal mental health programs, early risk assessment for breast and ovarian cancer prevention programs, and breast cancer survivorship programs. Anusha is very passionate about her work in STEM and is one of the first people to create a meditation program to be used in clinical research at Hoag Hospital. Please mute.
Oh, you found it? We should be on mute automatically.
Okay, thanks. I'll continue. Anusha is a sought-after motivational speaker around the world on the science of mindfulness and meditation and the intersection of wellness and social justice. She has delivered keynotes for health and wellness conferences, universities, Fortune 500 companies, and corporate events across North America and the UK. Anusha has over 15 years of international senior management experience working for global corporations, social justice, nonprofit organizations, and private companies in 3 continents. She holds a BA, MA, a diploma in mentoring. She's a certified professional life coach, yoga E-RYT teacher, and is a meditation practitioner. Anusha is also an adjunct professor at San Diego State University, where she teaches at the Weber Honors College on the intersection of wellness and social justice. Anusha is also a community partner with the Yoga and Body Image Coalition, a presenter at Kripalu, North America's largest yoga center, and an ambassador with the Food and Wellness Equity Collective. Women's health and social justice is at the heart of all that Anusha is involved with. Anusha's first book, Meditation with Intention, Quick and Easy Ways to Create Lasting Peace, was released in January of 2021. You can find it on Amazon. You can also follow Anusha at shantiwithin.com or on Instagram at shantiwithin. We will put these links in the chat. Thank you, Anusha, for being here today. It is such an honor to have you with us to share your wisdom and insights. And without further ado, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much for that very kind introduction, Ileana. It's a pleasure to be here with you all today, representing Hoag Hospital, to talk about a very important topic, especially in the time that we are in, of collective well-being and collective care. And it's what I say to my students at San Diego State University: we cannot all truly be well until all of us are well. And we're now in a post-pandemic world where we are in a mental health crisis, whether that's with ourselves as individuals or with the communities that we work with and serve. So today, I certainly didn't want this to be death by PowerPoint for you all, as it's Friday, it's December, we're nearing the end of the year. I want to lead you through a practice. So for those of you that may be unfamiliar with meditation, we'll get to do a practice today. And I wanted to leave you with 3 key takeaways in terms of how we can actually focus on our own well-being and then in turn focus on collective care and well-being. What I would love to do for the time that we have together today as well is to actually hear from each and every one of you. And there's two ways within which we can do that. Once I've finished giving this presentation and leading the practice, we will open up for Q&A, and you can either type your questions in the chat, which Ileana will moderate, or one of my favorite things is to actually hear from you directly. So please feel free to unmute and share accordingly. But what I want to do to begin with is to actually begin with the practice. So whether you're familiar with meditation or not, I'm going to be sharing practices from my book, Meditation with Intention, with foreword by Dr. Sadia Khan, who is the director of our breast cancer survivorship program at Hoag and a breast oncoplastic surgeon. And I'll be sharing an intention from my book today and practices as to how we can really think about living intentionally. And that's a vital aspect of collective care and collective well-being. So wherever you are, just come to a comfortable seat. You don't need to be sitting in Padmasana lotus pose or in any acrobatic position. What I always recommend to my patients, students, and clients is that you're sitting in a comfortable seat, ideally with some back support. So wherever you are, just come to that comfortable place. And you have a couple of options here. Let's debunk another common myth. You don't have to close your eyes. You can do this practice with your eyes open. What I have learned from world-renowned Dr. Robert Lewis, who is a neurosurgeon that I have the pleasure and honor and blessing of working with at Hoag, he also endorsed my book, is that 90% of what activates our brain comes through one of our main senses of sight. So simply closing the eyes, if that feels comfortable to you, or reverting the gaze by staring at a focal point on the ground, just begins to lessen that constant stimulation that we have. I talk a lot about the neuroscience of these practices in my book. We won't have time to cover all of that today, but that is a great resource that Ileana will share. So just come to whatever place serves you best in this moment. Eyes open or closed, sitting comfortably. And I invite you to just connect with the physical body by gently resting the palms on tops of the thighs. They can be facing upwards or downwards, whatever feels best to you in this moment. If your feet reach the ground, you can uncross the legs, rounding the soles of the feet. And let's just take a moment to arrive into the physical body, into this moment. Gently relaxing the shoulders down away from the ears, relaxing and releasing the muscles in the face, any tension in the neck, the jaw area. Gently releasing the point between the eyebrows, releasing the tongue from the hard palate of the roof of the mouth, and slowly and gently allowing the mind and body to come into that place of stillness and of quiet within, letting go of any cares, any concerns. And just gently drawing your attention to your breath without judgment and without resistance. If thoughts are coming into the mind, that is perfectly fine and normal. But just allow any thought forms that may be arising to gently drift away like clouds in the sky, returning to your body and your breath, your body and your breath, your body and your breath. And I want you all in this moment to relax, because there is no doing this practice wrong. If there are any external sounds, just let them be. And start to notice the shape, the weight of your breath in your body, the gentle rising and the falling. And just notice how your breath feels in this moment, without judgment, without resistance, just noticing. Again, if thoughts are coming into the mind, that is completely fine and normal. But just allow any thought forms that may be arising to gently drift away like clouds in the sky as you return to your body and your breath, your body and your breath, your body and your breath. And you will soon be inhaling for my count and exhaling for my count. So gently exhale all of the air out of the mouth. And then with the mouth closed, inhale through the nose for the count of 1, 2, 3. Exhale through the nose with the mouth closed for the count of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 1, 2, 3. Exhale, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 1, 2, 3. Exhale, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Continue that breath work pattern for 6 more rounds at your own pace, to your own count. You can inhale for 3 and exhale for 5, or inhale for 2 and exhale for 4, or inhale for 1 and exhale for 3. Again, there's no right or wrong, just pick whatever cadence works best for you in this moment. And as you inhale, I want you to silently repeat to yourself, I am at peace. And as you exhale, I want you to silently repeat to yourself, all is well in my world. I am at peace on the inhalation. All is well in my world on the exhalation. I am at peace on the inhale. All is well in my world on the exhale. Really allow yourself to feel a sense of peace washing over you in this moment as you inhale, and allow yourself to feel that all is well in your world as you exhale, regardless of your external situation or circumstance. In this moment, you are at peace on the inhale. And in this moment, all is well in your world on the exhale. You are at peace on the inhale. All is well in your world on the exhale. And once you've completed those 6 rounds of breath work, release, there's no rush or hurry to arrive. Returning to your normal rhythm and pattern of breathing as we take a moment of silence to absorb our practice. Slowly start to bring your consciousness and your awareness back to the physical body. Gently inviting some movement back into the body, perhaps wiggling the toes, the fingers, gently shaking the head from right to left, left to right, up and down. And then slowly beginning to feel the weight of your legs on the chair if you are seated, the weight of your arms on your legs, the weight of your head on your neck, as you slowly and gently blink the eyes open if they were closed, returning to your physical surroundings. I hope you all enjoyed that practice. That's one of my favorite practices that I teach our patients at Hoag. And it's very simplistic. You don't even have to do it for as long as we did. That could be something that you do upon rising in the morning, taking your attention to your breath. I'll share resources at the end of the meditation program that I am clinically testing at Hoag, as I also work in STEM at Hoag, and how you can, in the coming year, really begin to focus on your own self-care. And I'd love to hear from you all how the practice was. You can begin to type into the chat. We'd love to hear your thoughts, your comments, and of course, we will have enough time for a moderated Q&A and community dialogue. But now I want to share 3 tips when we think about decolonizing wellness and we think about the intersection of wellness and social justice, which is what Ileana wanted me to talk to you today about. I think the first step with this is really having a focus on destigmatizing mental health. And I see this with our patients, I see this with my students at SDSU, that the pressure of the past few years has had a deep and profound impact on all of us. And COVID isn't over. We now see that there was an outbreak just this week at my son's school. COVID cases are spiking in Orange County. So we're living in a time where things are still continuing to create stress and pressure in our lives. And I want to remind you all of what I said at the outset of today, that wellness begins with each and every one of us. And we cannot truly be well until all of us have equitable access to wellness and mental health support and healthcare, and the list goes on. And part of that is understanding that if wellness begins with us, we have to prioritize our own mental health. We have to prioritize our own needs. And I will share personally that for myself, I have arrived at the bottom of the list, being a frontline healthcare worker during the pandemic, working in cancer care and prevention, doing all of the things that I do at the university with social justice, being an author, being a mother, being a wife. My own needs have fallen to the bottom of my list. And I find myself often, especially when I'm in clinic at Hoag, pausing and thinking, I really need to take my own advice. I'm always encouraging our patients to prioritize their needs. But the question I invite you all to think about today is, are each of you prioritizing your own needs, or are everybody else's needs being met before yours? And that takes us to the beginning of the 3 takeaways that I have for you all today. The first of which is self-care isn't selfish. And we often think of self-care as something that is a reward, or we think of it as, a massage or getting our nails done or having a holiday or whatever that might be. Now, I'm not here to tell you that that isn't an aspect of self-care. But what I am here to invite you to do is to think about adopting self-care practices that can really help you in your daily life, professionally and personally. And to reframe the narrative around self-care not being selfish, with a highlight and an emphasis on each of our individual needs, specifically when it comes to mental health. And so a question that I invite you to sit with beyond the time that we have together today is, what are you doing to prioritize your own mental health? What are you doing in your life to give yourself license and permission to take care of yourself physically, mentally, and emotionally so that your psychosocial needs are met? Now, as I can imagine that I'm going to be talking about the impact of meditation and mindfulness. So simply adopting a daily 5-minute practice does work. I see this in my work in evidence-based medicine and science. I see this with our breast cancer patients daily at Hoag. A daily 5-minute meditation practice can and will change your mindset and change your life. The key, of course, is that you have to do it. I share multiple ways within which you can establish a meditation practice that works for you so that wellness can actually work for your busy lives. We all have competing priorities. We all are subject to the ongoing constant to-do list. And that brings me to point 2, self-boundaries. So the first is self-care isn't selfish. How can you prioritize your own mental health? The second is self-boundaries. And I found myself over the past year talking a lot more about boundaries in our lives. Often we have none. Often we set them and we don't honor them. Something I myself, again, have found myself doing a lot. I set a boundary and then either someone pushes back on the boundary, or I feel bad, I feel guilty. And then I think, okay, well, maybe I just won't honor that boundary. So when it comes to boundary setting and specifically self-boundaries, we have to set them and then we have to honor them. And we actually have to hold ourselves accountable, which is really difficult because very often when it comes to boundaries, people don't like it when we say no. People don't want us to say no. People just want us to keep doing and giving. And so part of prioritizing our own mental health and destigmatizing things like self-care and prioritizing your own needs is understanding that setting a boundary is the first step, but honoring that boundary is equally as important and vital to have the impact that it requires. So perhaps in the coming year, and as Ileana mentioned, as we near the end of a year, it always offers us a time, much like a birthday, to engage in self-reflection, which is a vital aspect of collective care and collective well-being. So how can you begin to set boundaries in your own life, be it in the workplace, be it with your colleagues, be it with your family, be it with your friends, and in turn honor them and understand that it's okay to say no. And that is something that we often don't do. We feel bad when we try to honor a boundary. And just to remind yourself that it's okay to say no. And sometimes it's vitally important for your own mental health that you do say no. And again, we'll have plenty of time to talk about each of these intentions. I'd love to hear from all of you with your questions. And the final point I want to talk about when it comes to collective care and well-being is nurturing your creative abilities within. And this is something that as we age, we often don't do, especially if we are in jobs which are robotic in nature, where we tend to do the same thing day in and day out. I have created work in a way that is definitely a privilege, where I get to nurture my creative abilities at Hoag in a hospital setting, at the university in an academic setting, and then in my own work in activism. So in that way, I am able to tap into my innate creative power and creative abilities and use them when it comes to my work specifically. And very often we think about creativity as art or music. For me, those were never my innate talents within. I was the person that in music class at school was given the triangle. So I was never an artist. When I'm drawing with my 4-year-old son, my drawings look similar to his. So I really want you to kind of reframe the narrative that you have around creativity. Yes, of course, it can be art, it can be music, but perhaps for many of us where that isn't our creative talents, it can be other things. And so really invite yourself to think about, what is it that brings you joy? And that's the final point I want to leave with you all today. What brings you joy? What can you do more of in the coming year of 2023 that creates happiness from within, that creates peace from within, and that enables you to feel and experience more joy in each moment of your life? Because that fundamentally is the practice of mindfulness and meditation. And when we in turn can feel happiness, when we in turn can embrace joy, by understanding that self-care isn't selfish, by honoring and setting our own self-boundaries, by tapping into our creative spirit and nurturing our creative abilities within, we'll be able to experience more joy. And I think in this time, in this world that we're living in, where we're constantly filled with so much suffering around us in our own country, in the world around us. You turn on the news cycle, very often it's incredibly negative. And we're living in a time filled with so much suffering that it's even more imperative that we tap into joy from within. That doesn't mean, and this is what I teach my students at SDSU, that we engage in, cultural appropriation or toxic spiritual and emotional bypassing. But by enabling and empowering ourselves to tap into our own joy within, we in turn can then have compassion and empathy for others. Two things that we really are missing in our society. And I think that's because so many of us are living in a triggered trauma response. So the more that we can engage in finding happiness in the small moments of each of our lives and tapping into more joy, in focusing on having compassion and empathy within. And I'll end with sharing an ancient Buddhist proverb that says, we cannot give that which we do not have. So if I don't feel love, compassion, and non-judgment in my own heart and mind, I'm not going to authentically be able to offer it to anybody else. I might pretend, I might pay lip service, but if I am authentically not feeling it, not living it, I'm only going to be offering judgment and a lack of love and a lack of compassion to everybody else. So the practice begins with us. And when we can truly live and embody the practice of meditation and mindfulness with a focus on collective care, that's one of the greatest gifts that we can give to ourselves and to the world around us. So I'd love now to stop talking and to hear from all of you. So Ileana, I'll hand back to you now. I don't know whether we have had any questions, but I would love to hear from each and every one of you. Again, there's two ways within which we can do that. You can type in the chat box, or we'd love to hear from you directly. You can raise your hand and unmute. So Ileana, over to you.
Anusha, thank you for those wonderful reflections. I feel like they're so needed. At the end of each year, I always either do a visioning board or some sort of reflection, and those takeaways I think are certainly going to help me set some intentions for the new year. But does anybody want to share what they got out of this conversation? Any questions that you have for Anusha?
I do. Hi. Thank you so much for sharing. And I particularly liked the bit when you talked about, I forgot what exactly the word you used. To me, I was thinking about creativity, and I thought that is so true. And I certainly see it myself and a lot of people also. Sometimes we get so used to putting ourselves in a box. Like we're all trying to contain ourselves, manage ourselves, control ourselves, all these put ourselves in the box. Then we're not able to fully express ourselves. To me, it's like the full expression of yourself, whatever that is very, very good for your energy, your body and your soul. So when you said that, I was like, yes. So thank you so much for sharing.
Oh, thank you so much, Stephanie. And I think as we get older, we tend to not feed that creativity within. And there's no reason that we don't. It's almost like we limit ourselves from tapping into that creative power that I feel that as children, we're so much more in touch with. And in many ways, we give ourselves more license to, and then as we age, we don't. And life gets in the way. Like I said, responsibilities, familial, personal, work-related, the ongoing to-do list. And nurturing our own creativity enables us to tap into joy from within. And I noticed that there was a comment in the chat box just about that kind of tapping into that joy from within and having that, as Ileana shared, as an important intention as we move throughout the coming year. So I see a hand from Adriana. Please go ahead.
Yes.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for this wonderful time. I wanted to echo what Stephanie said. It's exactly what I was thinking. And in fact, the kind of twist that I was trying to think about in my mind was what you said about how to use or nurture creativity in a current work environment or work experience or anything else. You know, you mentioned you're involved with activism, for example. I'm thinking that new models of creativity need to be developed, right, in this world, so that we can understand how in a job or other activity where, you find a variety of challenges and there are no expressive avenues for what's inside our souls, right? How to, anyway, I'll stop there, but I think you get my point. Like, how do we create new ways of new avenues for expressiveness that are not the traditional ones? Because I love the idea, and I have a 10-year-old daughter, so I love drawing with her, painting with her, etc., right? Dancing, singing, all that is wonderful. That's fundamental, and that's going to always be with us. Thank God for all those things. But I do believe that in this moment, we need new ways of expressing our creative selves. And anyway, thank you for letting me share that. It's something that I'm going to be thinking about for sure.
I love that. And thank you so much for sharing that, Adriana. And I'll just circle back to the workplace. We're at work most of our time, most of our lives, especially as we age. And therefore, if we don't have an outlet for our creativity, we can begin to stagnate. And I think that's what often causes stress, anxiety, and mental health issues. And so what I invite you to do, if you're a leader in your organization or you're working for an organization, is to find an ally. I think that's a really important thing to do. I mean, I'm very fortunate that in everywhere that I work, at the university, at the hospital, and with my work as a keynote speaker, that my clients and organizations that I work with are very receptive to the ideas that I have. But I'll say this, I'm leading that conversation. I am going to them with ideas. I am going to them with pitches. I'm not just sitting around waiting for the opportunity to come and drop into my lap. That has never been my lived experience. Perhaps that's occurred for some of you. That hasn't been the case with me. So remember that when we think about tapping into our creativity, we have to have the motivation, right? And the belief in ourselves and our idea. And I think part of that disconnect is very often we might have an idea and then we're afraid, or we might have an idea and we don't feel that support in the workplace. And what I have found in my own experience now of working in 3 countries is to find allies in the workplace, to find people who you can collaborate with, because none of us can do the work that we do alone. It's all about community. It really is. For us to have any success that I have had in my life has been because other people have helped me, other people have aided me, other people have opened doors. I find this narrative of self-made very bizarre, especially from a mindfulness perspective. All of us, we're humans, we need each other to survive and thrive. The pandemic has only illustrated that more clearly. And certainly in the workplace, it's all about a team. It's about a collaborative effort so we can all succeed. And so the more that we are able to focus on creating constructive and productive teams, the more that we can find allies who can help to nurture and push our creative ideas forward, the more that we will have success. And a great aspect of that is what I talk about in Meditation with Intention, of letting go of our own egoism, right? Of letting go of that own rife individualism that we so often feed in American society, to focus more on the collective. And to me, that's a fundamental aspect of a mindfulness and meditation practice. So thank you for that, Adriana. That was a wonderful point. Anybody else? We'd love to hear from you. I don't know if I missed any questions in the chat box, Ileana.
No, just some wonderful comments from Stephanie saying that expressing yourself and self-expression as simply as just say what's on your mind, move the way you want to move. We just need to allow it to happen in every moment. But it's often easier said than done. And I just said, good point, because just being our authentic selves at every moment is just, I think, a pathway to happiness, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, though. I want to caveat that by saying, when we say that we want to be our authentic selves, we also want to be mindful of others.
Mm-hmm.
You know, being our authentic self in the workplace it's not just about us. We're again thinking of what are the impact that my words and actions and behaviors are having on others. So we can show up authentically, but that doesn't mean that we give ourselves license to be living from a triggered trauma response. You know, meditation and mindfulness practices specifically aid us in understanding that our trauma is our trauma, but it is interconnected. And therefore, how can I manage my own trauma, manage my own suffering, so that I can show up in the workplace and in my personal life authentically, but also at the same time, and just as importantly, be mindful of my thoughts and my words and my action and my behavior and the impact that's having on others.
I wanted to take this opportunity to have this space with you to share a little bit about our work, Anusha, and to get your insights. Being part of the ACEs Trauma Informed Network of Care, one of the things that we have strived to do is to plant some seeds in communities about how we can recover from trauma and implement healing practices into our organizations and communities. And we heard from many community health workers, from people in the field, that they were burnt out, that they needed support. And we initiated a series of community healing events that organizations implemented and did in their own way what works for them in different populations. And we're really excited to be able to have numerous, like almost over 20 events that community organizations led. I love the work that you do around decolonizing wellness. A lot of the times these types of things are not as accessible to communities, maybe because of the expense, such as yoga and sound healing. We were able to provide some funds to support these events. But love to hear your insights on how we can collectively build collective well-being and healing, and how do we decolonize these practices so that they're accessible to communities?
That's a great question, and something that I teach about on my Web of Honors college course at San Diego State University. And here's the point. Wellness is very elitist. Yoga has become very elitist in the West. It is inaccessible, it is elitist, and it is the opposite of diverse, equitable, and inclusive. And that's been quite purposeful, to be honest with you. You know, wellness is $1 trillion industry, which, upholds the paradigm of capitalism. And if you, for example, search #yoga, what you will find is often a white, thin, able-bodied woman who comes up in some completely inaccessible acrobatic pose. And yoga is a part of my indigeneity. It's actually a philosophy. And that is what devastates me, especially with the work that I do at Hoag Hospital with our cancer patients. I'll meet with them in clinic and I'll say yoga. And immediately their response is, oh, I can't do yoga. I'm not thin enough. I'm not flexible enough. I'm not able-bodied enough. And the list goes on. And what I say to them is, actually, yoga is meditation. Yoga is mindfulness. Yoga is an asana. Asana is the physical postural practice that we equate with yoga in the West. And so all of us can practice yoga in every aspect of our lives. Yoga ultimately means union. Are we living in unity internally? Are we living in unity externally? So that in itself immediately begins to disband this notion of inversions or acrobatic exercise as yoga. right? So meditation and mindfulness are yoga. And when I begin to reframe that narrative and decolonize yoga with my patients, they begin to actually understand that, of course, they can focus on their breath. Of course, that's accessible to them in each moment of their day, especially for our newly diagnosed breast cancer patients. So that's point one. Point two is, and I'm assuming that most of us are living in Orange County or in Southern California, if we go to a yoga space, it often isn't welcoming, right? It often tends to feed everything above that I have listed. And so how can each of us take on the onus and responsibility of creating more equitable spaces? And certainly you're doing a wonderful job of that, Ileana, at Be Well, where people from all diversities, different ethnicities, different races, all genders, all sexual orientations, all religions, basically all body types, people with multiple, physical abilities, mental abilities. How do we create spaces where people will feel comfortable enough to attend? Because the other aspect of that conversation is people just don't feel comfortable going to yoga and wellness spaces, especially in Southern California, and especially with what has transpired, over the past few years in wellness communities. So I think there's a number of ways that each of us can take responsibility and try to create more equitable and inclusive and accessible spaces, and to understand that every community's needs are different. So how can we tailor a program where everybody can get something out of it, right? Are we creating a space that is serving the community that we serve? Or are we creating spaces that is just serving us and our own egos and our own individual needs? And that's a really important question. I find this often. I've been to enough asana classes, which is the physical postural practice, where I'm thinking to myself, nobody can do any of that that's present in your class, yet you're continuing to teach whatever the class plan that individual has in mind. And so it's vital that we are meeting people where they're at, and we're trying to create brave spaces. And I want to talk about this for a minute. We often hear about this concept of a safe space. I prefer brave space, because what is safe for me may not be safe for each and every one of you on this call. And yoga is by nature, as a philosophy, trauma informed. So it's vital that we're meeting people where they're at. And we're understanding that safe spaces seems idealistic, but if we can create a brave space that is deeply embedded in equity and justice and inclusion and accessibility, then people will hopefully feel welcome in coming. And the second aspect of that is that we are then inviting feedback from the communities that we are serving of how we can improve and how we can take that next step in that conversation around collective well-being, collective care, and equity and justice. I think I saw a hand raised, Ileana.
Yes, I think it was Adriana. Did you?
Yeah, yes, I did. I had a quick question. I didn't want to interrupt though, so please don't let me interrupt your train of thought, because it's so great to learn more about how we can use yoga. I mean, yoga is something so accessible to everyone, not obviously, like you said, it's not normally or traditionally accessible in terms of how the spaces have been created here in the West, but it is something accessible in terms of how easy it is for us to just engage with it, right? If we want to. But anyway, but what I was thinking about was, so the idea of colonization, I wonder if there will be an opportunity to also talk about decolonizing wellness, not just from the perspective of what we can create, as you were sharing, which is so huge and important, but also from the perspective of what types of changes are happening within the current structures within healthcare, and what opportunities are there to decolonize well-being within those healthcare structures. I don't know if that question is fully relevant here, but I wanted to bring it up because anyway, I could go on, I could share a story, but I'm sure we all have stories of how kind of traumatic it can be just to go in and see a doctor who will not have the time or willingness to truly listen and address medical issues. And I'll stop there. You probably know where I'm coming from, but I hope you understand my question.
Yeah, and I think that that's an important kind of, an important conversation that we need to be having more in healthcare in general. And I'll just share from my own personal perspective. When I meet with my patients at Hoag Hospital, I am meeting each individual patient where they're at. I am also listening. With that being said, I feel for physicians. We knew that physician burnout and physician suicidality was a big problem pre-pandemic. That's only been exacerbated during the pandemic. We now are dealing with nurse burnout. Those of you that work for hospitals will be aware of this. Those of you that work in healthcare will be aware of this. So I think it's an educational piece as well. From what I hear, just from listening to physicians and clinicians and nurses, is the level of paperwork that's now required, different hospital systems. So I think the more that administrators can listen, and I think it's really important in general that we just don't have a top-down approach. In any organization that we're working with, we have a bottom-up to the best of our abilities, and we're listening to people and trying to understand the urgent needs that need to be addressed in the time that we are in. Every provider is different as well. I think it's important to find a provider who is able to make you feel seen and heard, and who you feel comfortable with. And that can be a journey in of itself. I do feel that we are very fortunate in Orange County. There is a number of different providers available, so many different hospitals, so many different choice. But of course, that also does come down to insurance. That's a conversation that we're not having today. So I think it's important that we're just mindful. Education can be important, and raising these issues within our respective organizations and, with your providers in general. I know that for me, it's been helpful to also have these conversations with friends and family too, just around recommendations of providers who people have felt confident and comfortable with. But yes, I think that to circle back to another point that you made around decolonization, well, that's a whole subject and topic and presentation in of itself. I feel the fact that hospital settings are now focused on bringing in so much more. I mean, for example, our Hoag Centers for Wellness, we have one in Irvine and one in Newport, offer a variety of services from massage to pelvic health therapy, to guided imagery, to acupuncture, to Reiki, to Pilates, to yoga, to meditation, to mindfulness. We have a licensed marriage and family therapist. We have a reproductive psychiatrist. We have licensed clinical social workers. And I think that Hoag has really been at the forefront of leading this conversation on wellness, specifically in Orange County and beyond, as our wellness centers opened over 7 years ago now in Orange County. And so we're only continuing to expand and to grow under the amazing leadership of my colleague and mentor, Dr. Alison Brooks, who is the executive medical director for the Women's Health Institute at Hoag. And all of this was really pioneered by her and her true belief in wellness and trying to make wellness more accessible and equitable for all.
Anusha, that's exciting. We've had Kaiser and Chalk and Hoag present, and definitely very innovative in the approaches. And I love that we are experiencing cultural shifts in healthcare where it's more holistic. And we're working on trying to create these shifts also in communities. But we have to also implement them within our organizations. So hopefully these conversations will create more brave spaces for us to create those changes that we need.
Yes, no, thank you so much. So, and I think there was I saw a comment from Andrea that said, especially for folks with physical disabilities, Orange County Western Yoga is unsafe. 100%. I think if you have a physical disability, I'm not sure of any real studio that is catering to the needs of those. The good news, I think there has been a change with at least some spaces trying to offer things like chair yoga or trying to focus more on the meditative aspects. but we're a long way from being truly inclusive and accessible in Orange County when it comes to the conversation of yoga and wellness. And we have to do better in that regard.
Yes. There's a couple of people in our audience that hosted a couple of community healing events, Kalita and Mario. My question to you is, we want to invite feedback on how we all can improve. What did you learn from your communities? I'm just curious to see how we can take this to the next level in 2023. If you have any insights from a community perspective.
Well, I would say that there is definitely an appetite for more events around community healing. And to the extent that we can embrace additional, a larger scope of ages, I'm hearing more young people, high school and older, who are really struggling in school. And those young adults who are coming out of college looking for work, they're not motivated really to actually pursue employment. They're staying home with mom and dad because they can't afford an apartment. And therefore, they're not as motivated as perhaps you and I were when we came out of college, to kind of launch out there and be more independent. So I think there's some trauma there that hasn't really been addressed as effectively as it could be. And our community would benefit from more forums where they can express their concerns and get the tools that they need to feel like they can move on to the next level of life.
Yeah, that's very true. I know the governor just made a huge investment in mental health services recently that was announced over $400 million, I believe, for mental health supports. But yeah, we are not okay. We need to get better. So I appreciate your comments, Kalita. Mario, do you want to share any insights?
Can I just jump in with Kalita's comments? Because I think thank you so much for sharing that, Kalita, and it's absolutely true. I will say with my own students who are undergraduate, all between upper division, 3rd and 4th year, between the ages of 19 to 24, it's a mental health crisis. It really is. And unfortunately, the university is just not equipped to deal with it. That's the problem. I was talking to them just in class on Monday, and it sounds good. I share these resources and you've got, they've got this counselor and that, and they're just like, yeah, that's great if you want to wait 2 months, or you can't get in. If you are having a serious issue, you're given, 1 to 3 sessions, and the list goes on. And so therefore it shows, again, we have to destigmatize mental health, and we have to understand that our young people are in a crisis. I read some research this week that said that teenagers' brains have changed in a negative way as a result of the pandemic. Wow. And this was just new research that was coming out, just of the impact of homeschooling, the impact of the pandemic. And please be mindful that our brains develop until we are 25 years old. I think people don't realize that. We just think it's into childhood, but actually the brain continues to develop until you're 25 years old. So it has been very negative for young people, whether they're in high school, whether they're at university. And I think we all as a community, certainly within our own communities, need to be mindful of that and need to be thinking about how we can bridge the gap with community healing practices. And Kalita made an important point as well that can be age appropriate, right? How are we offering this to younger audiences that will feel welcome coming to spaces where they hopefully will see more people that, are of their age group and demographic. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. And to add on to that, what I'm also finding is that the churches are not prepared to handle it. The parents are not prepared to handle it. So, these young people don't know where to get any help. And like you said, the wait list is long. And especially in the African-American community, where young people would prefer to have a counselor who's also African-American, there's a great deficit in Southern California.
And Kalita raises a vital point as well. I think understanding why it's important for African Americans to have African American counselors is a conversation that we often don't have.
Yeah.
Or for people of color to have people of color representing them and understanding the unique issues that face people of color in America. And that nuance is often missed. So thank you, Kalita, I'd love to find out more about the work that you are doing. So hopefully Ileana can connect us after this.
Yes. I have a couple of connections to make, Kalita, for you as well. So
Wonderful. I welcome them all. Thank you.
we have about 5 minutes left. I did have a couple of announcements, but we have time for one more question. I don't know, Mario, if you wanted to share. I'm putting you on the spot. No? I think he's not available, but anybody else have any last comments or questions or any thoughts? Adriana?
Yes, just a really quick comment. Thank you so much, Kalita. I echo all your sentiments about the impact of the pandemic on youth. And it's so incredible that that we are bringing up that focus right now. That's the future, right? So we have to be mindful of that. I wanted to bring up the fact that right after the hardest part of the pandemic, a friend of mine who is a pastor in a church in Newport Beach did this amazing workshop webinar on collective healing. And it was just really, she brought this wonderful expert on the topic. And of course, it was incredibly enriching, and I was very happy to join. But certainly there was, I don't recall that there was any conversation of the impact of any inequitable structures or the need for greater equity in general. So I was remiss, obviously, that was the case. And then after that, I don't believe that there was much follow-up. I was very fortunate to be part of the conversation, and I raised up within that community the question of the overall trauma of immigrants and the impact of the pandemic on immigrants who have many in the community already experienced significant trauma prior to the pandemic. And so I raised up that question, and of course, there was a good answer, and then that was it, right? But the point that I wanted to bring up today was just to your point, Ileana, about community connections. I mean, Newport Beach, I live in Santa Ana, and my friends that I engage with in Newport Beach, very different worlds, right? And so I just bring that up because when we're talking about community connections, we really have to be mindful of where we are creating these new ideas, these new spaces, these new structures, so that especially as we're continuing to grow in, within the community work that we are doing here in Santa Ana or in other places where there's been the significant impact of the pandemic on communities of color. We have to be mindful that we do broaden our vision. And I'll stop there just to make sure that we are really leveraging the resources across Southern California or the broader Orange County community. And anyway, so just wanted to throw that point out there. Thank you so much, Ileana. This is wonderful. And have a wonderful day, everyone.
And I'll just jump in before we end. Thank you for that, Adriana. And I think it's a really important point that we have to keep going back to as people who are working in communities. Are we engaging with the community that is being served to actually find out what their issues are and listen to them? Or are we coming up with ideas that totally removed from the actual needs of the community. And I find that that can often be the case. And again, this isn't about intention. What I teach my students is intention doesn't equal impact. It doesn't equate to impact. We can all have the best intentions, but if our intention is having a negative impact, we have to pause, right? And we have to invite the chance for us to commit to unlearning and relearning, which is a vital aspect of adopting a decolonial mindset. So yeah, I mean, we could go on with this conversation. And I think, Ileana, someone had suggested that perhaps you do a follow-up to this.
Yes.
But yes, so much here. And this is why these conversations on equity, these conversations on collective care, these conversations on collective well-being can't just be a checkbox, can't just be a tick box like, oh, my organization's done implicit bias training, I'm done. When we think about the true commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, it has to be a daily practice within ourselves and with the communities that we serve and with the organizations that we work for. So let's all continue to push that needle, right? And work to reframe the narrative and ensure that way that we can have that focus on equity and justice.
That was beautiful, Anusha. I just want to thank you for your time. I also want to thank Hope for sharing your talent and wisdom with us. I think this conversation has been wonderful. I like your comment about not killing us with PowerPoint. This has been really a rich conversation, and definitely will take it into 2023. I just have a few slides to just close up our session, to share with you some additional resources. We are working with the Heck Trauma Institute. If you go to their website at traumaist.org, you will be able to see some of the recorded sessions and trainings that they've done on mindfulness-based stress reduction. They have a lot of great resources there, and they've also been doing some in-person sessions. So if you want to learn more, they're a wonderful partner that we've been working with. Additionally, we invite you to join us at the next Be Well OC Coalition meeting, which is combined with our ACEs Aware Trauma-Informed Network of Care. It'll take place on December 15th from 12 to 3. You have the option of going in person or online in Zoom, and I'll put the link in for registration in the chat. But and lastly, we just want to thank you for being part of this and for being part of this healing series. In the chat, I put together the other sessions that we've had that we've recorded. They're on the Be Well website. This session will also be put on the Be Well website and YouTube. And we thank you all, and we hope you have a wonderful weekend, Friday, and happy holidays to all. And please follow Anusha. She has some wonderful insights and thoughts and articles that I always get inspired by. So
thank you so much. And I'll just pop my website in to the chat box. And if you are on Instagram, you can follow me there. I'm very active on there, specifically with my work in activism and at the university. And I hope that I wish you all the best. I hope that you'll all take on board some of what we covered today. On my website has the book Meditation with Intention and details of my membership program, which is focused on giving everybody access to the meditation program I'm clinically testing at Hoag. So thank you all so much. It's been such a blessing to be with you all. And thank you so much, Ileana and Be Well, for coordinating these vital conversations.